Going in 3, 2, and 1. Hello and welcome everyone to another episode of All Steelers Talk, part of AllSteelers.com. I'm your host, Noah Strackbein, joined always by Donnie Droon. Donnie, it's probably the most boring time of the offseason, I would say. Rookie minicamp just ended. OTAs probably won't be a thing in Pittsburgh. And the mandatory minicamp isn't until June. So we're probably about 3 to 4 weeks before anything exciting is happening in the football world again. But there's still a lot to talk about. And we're going to start off with the Rookie of the Year, Najee Harris, his odds for Rookie of the Year, actually, and how he looks to play a role in Matt Canada's offense. He, along with Kendrick Green and Pat Freiermuth, gave a little bit of an insight into what we should expect from Canada's offense. What do you take away from it? What do you expect? What are Najee's Rookie of the Year odds?
Yeah, I think just speaking on, going from Najee to Matt Canada, currently his odds on BetOnline are plus 1,000. That brings him tied for as the sixth highest odds for any rookie heading into the 2021 season.
Who's above not really Najee Harris?
I'm sorry?
Who's above Najee Harris? Who's six people above?
Trevor Lawrence is up there. I know. I think Mac Jones isn't. I know Najee's tied with Kyle Pitts. I know that for sure.
Got to be Jamar Chase. Has got to be.
Yeah, Jamar Chase is up there for sure.
Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson.
Yeah, man, put me on the spot. Look at that, dude. But I know for sure off the top of my head that Najee is tied for six. At least the last time I looked. Whenever I wrote the article last week. Let's see about it. Yeah, Trevor Lawrence at plus 350, Trey Lance at plus 650, Justin Fields at plus 700, Mac Jones at plus 750, and Jamar Chase at plus 800.
Mac Jones
might not even start. Not even start.
What do you mean might not even start? There's no way he's walking into New England and starting week 1 over Cam Newton. That's not happening. I don't know how Mac Jones is above. I could get the rest of them, even though I really don't, but Mac Jones blows my mind. But all right, Najee Harris at plus 1,000. Matt Canada's offense. How are you feeling about it?
Dude, I kind of like it. I really like that bang for the buck, man. And, we even just going into what Najee and Pat said about Matt Canada's offense, it's not going to be a one-trick pony kind of thing. They are going to utilize Najee Harris in both the passing and the running game. I believe I read from your work that Najee was getting a little bit of reps at receiver, or at least lining up in some sort of facet in the passing game. So they're dead set on using Najee every way they can, and taking running back to the 24th overall pick. I would certainly hope so. But a lot of people held Najee as the best all-around running back, and coming into the draft, and just landing on a team like the Steelers, a team who are definitely going to look to reestablish their running game identity in 2021, and they have a new bright young mind in Matt Canton to help lead that front. So I like those odds, man. Does he win it? I'm not super sure. He's going to have a really good season.
Yeah.
But man, like compared to those other guys, just if you're trying to lay down a couple bucks, I absolutely like the value for that.
Oh, I love the value for Najee at 1,000. I mean, I could see everybody but Mac Jones pulling it off. When it comes to his role in the offense, I think that goes a long way in the whole, circle of things here, because I do expect him to play a little bit of wide receiver. I do expect him to line up in the slot a lot, actually. And what Pat Freiermuth was saying is that the Steelers are going to use a lot of motion. A lot of pre-snap motion, which is huge. You can move chess pieces around. That's where guys like Ray McLeod is going to get involved real heavy. That's where Najee is going to be utilized more in like a Kansas City type offense than a regular Steelers RPO styled offense. It can also open the door for guys like Anthony McFarland. I don't really know where Benny Snell fits into a motion style offense, but it is what it is. It's good to see that it's getting creative. The Steelers are finally looking at things, at least first glance, from what we're saying, and they're going to line people up where they're best needed. They're going to move fast, but not short fast, if that makes any sense. It's simple but complex. That's what Pat Freiermuth kept saying, simple but complex, and I think that goes a long way. The transition's got to be smooth. You know what I mean? Ben's going to hold it back because Ben's stuck in one way. The rest of the offense is trying to learn a new way. So it's got to be simple but complex. I think Matt Canada's offense works perfectly as we know right now. What do you expect out of the rest of the rookies from what you saw at rookie minicamp?
You know, it's going to be a whole lot of things because, you know, outside of Najee and Pat Freiermuth, who, you know, even so, you know, he's not exactly tied in one in Pittsburgh quite yet. Eric Ebron is still there, and Eric Ebron still looks to be a big part of that offense in 2021. After them, it kind of gets a little bit shaky. Kendrick Green, you know, everybody's talking about him potentially starting as a center. I'm not quite sure that the Steelers are willing, at least right now in late May, they're willing to hand a rookie job over, you know, guys like J.C. Hassenauer and B.J. Finney, two veterans who they've seen play at that position before. But, you know, hopefully time will tell. I think we all think very highly of Kendrick Green and what he brings to the table, but it's just a matter of him anchoring down and, you know, kind of assuming all of those responsibilities before the season. After that, though, it does get kind of, I don't want to say shaky, but, you know, I don't see a guy like Isaiah Loudermilk making a huge difference in his first year. You know, I don't see you know, any of the Texas A&M guys making a big difference in their first year. And, you know, I think all of those picks were just to shore up the depth. But, you know, I think it's easy to say that guys look really good in, you know, rookie mini camp where there's no pads, you know, it's just them kind of working out. But I think whenever training camp and the preseason rolls around, we'll start to get a better idea of what those guys actually look like.
Yeah, no doubt. And the guy that I was kind of waiting for you to say that I thought you were going to throw out there is maybe might have a role as Quincy Roche. And I honestly think that could go out the door. I think that I think a week ago, you looked at it and you said it's him and Cassius Marsh, not great, but Quincy could probably have a role, play a big impact as a rookie, kind of like Alex Highsmith did. And then Ryan Kerrigan gets signed to the Eagles. The Steelers are linked to a team that was interested in Kerrigan. Now you got to start thinking, are they going to bring in a veteran? Are they going to bring in Anthony Chickalo or, you know, Jayrone Elliott? What are they going to do at outside linebacker? Because apparently they're not satisfied.
Yeah, I definitely think they're looking for, you know, that veteran presence. And I was waiting for you to bring up a guy like Ryan Kerrigan, because indeed the Steelers were linked to him. So that kind of shows you they're not quite satisfied with their depth at outside linebacker. And I don't think they should be, because outside of Quincy Roche, who, you know, hasn't played a single snap in the NFL, there's really not a whole ton of depth there. So, you know, had they been able to land a guy like Kerrigan or, you know, maybe another cheap veteran, that wouldn't be a bad move at all. And the Steelers still have a little bit of cap space to, you know, wheel and deal for, you know, a veteran guy, that can go in and at minimum provide some depth behind TJ and Alex Highsmith.
Yeah, all the time. And I think that Justin Houston, Melvin Ingram, they're names that people keep bringing up. I could see it, yes. At the same time, last year, Justin Houston's cap hit was $9 million, and he had 8 sacks. So it's hard to say, oh, you're going to take a $3 million cap hit cut this year just to play backup in Pittsburgh. Yeah. I don't really know if that's suited for him. Melvin Ingram, maybe, but injuries concerning, obviously. And then you go back to Jayrone Elliott, Anthony Chickalo. I don't want either of them on the field. But if I had to pick, I guess Jayrone Elliott didn't play terribly last season when called upon. So, you bring him back. He plays well on special teams. I don't know, but I do expect the Steelers to definitely make a move at edge rusher. I talked about this the other day. The Steelers, if I expect them to do 3 more things this offseason, it's to sign a veteran edge rusher at one point this season. TJ Watt's probably going to get his big deal. I would just imagine that happens this year and not next year. And a guy like Josh Dobbs or Jalen Samuels or maybe even Zach Gentry, I could see them on their way out, at least one of them, just to get like either another draft pick next season or to free up some cap space, something. But the Steelers love to wheel and deal their 4th and 5th round picks, and then those extra pieces come June, July. I could see all 3 of those things happening at this point moving forward.
Yeah, most definitely. You know, let's talk about it. I think the Steelers, you know, their identity in free agency, if they need to, you know, plug in someone into a depth chart, it's going to be a guy they're already familiar with and a veteran guy at that. You know, they are suckers for bringing back guys who know their systems. And, you know, if they brought back a guy like Elliott or Chickalo, it wouldn't surprise me at all. Do I hope so? Absolutely not. I don't want to see any of those guys playing in a, you know, big capacity at all in 2021. Granted, you know, they would only be signed for depth purposes, but, you know, we've seen injuries plague the Steelers once more, and we'll probably see it again sometime there in the future. As you know, as far as guys like Dobbs or, blanking on his name, Samuels or even Zach Gentry, you know, I think if they were able to even get a 4th or 5th round pick for any of those guys, I think that'd be a phenomenal But I mean, let's call it like you see it. You know, the Steelers, like you said, don't really place high value on those 4th, 5th round picks. I mean, we've seen them time and time again just kind of throw them in trades, you know, as trade bait. They were willing to give up a 4th round pick in the 2022 draft to move up into the 5th round of this year's draft, which kind of shows you that they don't really value those mid-round picks quite essentially well. Granted, are they going to get a comp pick next year? Yeah, absolutely. Probably. You know, looking at a 3rd round pick for Bud Dupree and everybody else who left. But at the end of the day, you know, Kevin Colbert is, you know, not a rookie at this kind of thing. You know, he's been doing this for over 2 decades now. So, yeah, you know, I think at the end of the day, you know, you got to trust Colbert and what he's doing. And for the most part, I think those trades have worked out pretty well, at least in a 1-year capsule.
Yeah, they all tend to work out. And the thing with Josh Dobbs and Jalen Samuels is that the Steelers could wheel and deal their 4th and 5th round picks because those guys go for 4th and 5th round picks. You know, you could get rid of Dobbs, you could get rid of Samuels for 4th or 5th round pick this season and probably walk away without losing anything. It's not, I've said this time and time again, that Jalen Samuels no longer has a role in Pittsburgh. I think that's pretty much done. Josh Dobbs is going to end up on the practice squad if he doesn't end up somewhere else. And Zach Gentry is probably never going to see the field except for on special teams. So there's really no point in keeping any of them around. And if you could go get your 4th round pick before you bank on a comp pick next season, you just made up for Isaiah Loudermilk, who will play no role this season at all. When we come back, are the Steelers Super Bowl contenders? Because at this point, if the last ride isn't ride or die, what's the point? We'll talk about that and Troy Polamalu's Hall of Fame presenter selection next on All Steelers Talk. Are the Steelers Super Bowl contenders? At this point, that is the biggest question anybody in Pittsburgh wants to know. It's the only question the Steelers want to know. Cam Hayward said it the other day on NFL Network that it doesn't matter who's AFC North champs as long as somebody wins a Super Bowl. Okay. Can the Steelers do it? This is Ben's last ride. Are the Steelers Super Bowl contenders?
Oh, I think what you said before we went to break really resonates, because if they're not Super Bowl contenders, what are we doing then? You know, why is Ben still playing? Why did Ben Roethlisberger take a pay cut and come back? I think if you look at the pieces they lost, and I think if you look at the pieces they added, I can't sit here and say the Steelers got significantly better over the offseason. I can't. I just can't do that. Did they remain kind of like in the same boat that they were heading into last year? Yeah, I think so. I still think they have a top 3 defense in the league. You know, you still, for what it's worth, have a Hall of Fame quarterback. You know, you still have a very young, talented receiving core. The only thing that really worries me is a offensive line that played horrible last year. They lost 3 of its 5 starters, and there's a big youth movement going, you know, across the offensive line. And we'll see how those young guys react. You know, granted, Najee Harris was, you know, a very good pickup for the Steelers in terms of the running and hopefully the receiving game, but there's a lot of unknowns, especially with Matt Canada. I know there's a lot of hype around him and the good things he can do. We still haven't seen him fully take over the reins as an offensive coordinator. You know, we haven't seen what his play calling was like or any of that kind of stuff. I don't know, man. I think looking at last year and how the Steelers kind of fell apart throughout the, you know, the end stretch of the season, I'm not super sure they'd be able to walk into Buffalo and pull out a win. I'm not sure they could walk into Kansas City and pull out a win. I'm just not sure, man. I don't think they're right up there with the heavyweights of the AFC right now, and I'm not so sure I can sell myself on them being Super Bowl contenders. So I think they can compete for a AFC divisional title. I absolutely do, and I absolutely hope they will. But, you know, when talking about bringing home another Lombardi trophy, which is a yearly expectation for the Steelers, no matter who's on the team, I don't know, man. I don't know.
So here's my thing. I agree. And I think it's impossible to argue the other way. You can't say, oh, the Steelers fixed all their needs and they're going to be an 11-0 team again this season and they're just going to – they're top tier. They're not. At this point, they're probably second in the AFC North talent-wise. They're nowhere near the top of the AFC. But when it comes to contending, that's a big question. It's a loaded question. For one, you don't have to play Tennessee, Kansas City, Baltimore, and Cleveland in a playoff stretch. Most times you're going to get whacked with 1 or 2 very hard games, and chances are you'll end up with a team that you don't mind playing in the first round, maybe if you're lucky, the divisional round. Say the Steelers win the AFC North. They get an easy wild card game. Boom. They're moving on up.
Yep.
At that point, they're probably not going to play Kansas City, who would be my favorite to win the AFC again until proven otherwise.
Yep.
So chances are there goes one heavyweight game. And if somebody gets knocked out, I mean, the Steelers have done this before. You know, remember the years when Tennessee was the team to beat and Baltimore was the team to beat? And then Baltimore would go into the playoffs and knock out Tennessee, and the Steelers ended up in the Super Bowl. That's how this works. You know, you just kind of there's a luck factor that goes into being a Super Bowl contender. I think that they could? Do I think they could win enough times to make it to a Super Bowl? Yeah. I don't know if they're going to ever have the ability to beat a team like Tampa Bay or Green Bay if Aaron Rodgers decides to say. Maybe they could beat Seattle. Maybe they could beat the Niners. I don't know, though. I don't know if that's a question or if that's realistic.
I think it's all about getting hot at the right time.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
I think at least a small part of why we saw the Steelers exit early in the playoffs last year was they kind of cooled off there, you know, at the end of the regular season. I don't think there's any debating that. I mean, we're looking at a team that started 11-0 and then ended up kind of, you know, squeaking by, you know, into the playoffs. Granted, they did win their division, but, you know, it went down right to the wire for even that divisional race. But,
yeah, exactly.
I mean, I'm looking at their final 6 games for the 2020 season right now. You host Baltimore. You're then on the road at Minnesota. You come back home. You face the Titans. Then you're on the road at Kansas City. Come back home versus Cleveland, and on the road at Baltimore. That's not a favorable schedule at all. That is a gauntlet.
It is a gauntlet, but imagine if they pull it off. You want to talk about getting hot at the right time?
Even if they do, they're limping into the postseason like they did last year.
Are they though? Like imagine if they go into that last stretch and somehow they pull it off health free. There's no injuries, and which, you know, is super optimistic. But in this scenario, they pull off at least 4 wins in that 6-game stretch, and you're walking into the AFC or to the playoffs, AFC North champions. I don't know. You want to talk about being hot at the right time? That's a lot of momentum. You just beat a lot of teams that you're probably going to see in the playoffs.
Bro, if they go like 4-2 during that stretch, you really got to like how they're playing heading into the postseason.
Exactly.
You know, with that being considered, yeah, absolutely. You know, I think it all depends on how they finish the regular season, because, you know, those 6 games that I just mentioned, those are tough. Those are not cupcakes. Those are not walk in the parks. All of those teams are, you know, considerably high talented playoff teams heading into this year. You know, it's not going to be an easy stretch no matter what. But I think just looking at the talent the Steelers have, you know, with, you know, I think we can both agree, still one of the best defensive units in the league. I know there's a lot of pressure on Alex Highsmith to replace Bud Dupree's production. I know everybody is kind of wary, you know, on Steven Nelson leaving and how that, you know, weakens the Steelers secondary. But, you know, I think regardless, you know, top to bottom, they still have one of the best defenses in the league. And go to the offense side of the ball, we're talking about a Steelers team that led the entire league in drops. You know, so let's say they fix that problem, and all of a sudden the offense starts finding its rhythm. You now have a brand new running back who's probably going to help in more ways than one on the offense side of the ball. So there's a lot to like about the Steelers team in 2021. I'm just not sure they'll be able for an entire 18-game stretch to move forward like they should and kind of catch that momentum heading into the playoffs.
I agree. I don't disagree. I think it takes a lot for the Steelers to even be considered anywhere close to a Super Bowl team. And I think it's going to take a lot of, for one, nobody can get hurt. There's no depth anywhere on this team. No one can get hurt. Nobody at all. One injury happens, one major injury happens, whole season's done.
Let me ask you this. Do you think had Bud Dupree and Devin Bush been healthy for that playoff run, do you think anything's different?
Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh, yeah. I think that if the defense stays healthy, the Steelers, I think a lot stays the same that it did earlier in the season compared to the end of the season. For one, the offense, as much as those RPOs were just Randy Fichtner being addicted to RPOs, it was a way to slow down this team so that the defense didn't have to be on the field all the time. You got guys like Devin Bush and Bud Dupree out there play after play. I mean, you don't have to worry about that. You could be out there all the time. So I don't know. I think that the offense changes. I think that I think that coming back from a 28-point deficit is a lot different. The changes are there's a lot better chances in that situation.
And let's not forget, and like there was a small window of that game. It like
that's what I'm saying.
Beginning fourth quarter, like mid fourth quarter, the Steelers were well in that game. Like they got down 28 points, but like they kind of clawed themselves back, and that was a game until the entire end. You know
exactly. So you have a good defense at that point. The defense was depleted. You have a good, strong defense at that point. I mean, if injuries don't happen to the Steelers in 2020, and you just have any faith that the offense could just do anything if everyone was healthy and everything was moving well, then I think the Steelers are a team that probably at least made it to the next round of the playoffs. Do they make it any farther than that? I don't know, but they certainly beat the Browns. I think they compete for the number 1 seed in the AFC heading into the postseason if the defense is healthier than it is by week 10, 11.
I think just for me, one of the big factors is going to be, can Big Ben hold himself up over that gauntlet of now an 18-week regular season? That's including any potential playoff runs as well. We look at last year. I know he got off to a pretty solid start, but he definitely slowed down. Was that his age coming through? Was that a product of the people around him not playing well? Because he was playing with a very below average offensive line, a receiving core who couldn't catch a cold, and running back rooms that pretty much consisted of you and I.
Yeah, exactly.
Was he a product of all of that, or should we really be concerned of Ben, and his health down the stretch of the 2021 season?
Exactly. And there's a bunch of guys like that. Cam Hayward is a guy who's no stranger to age. Stephon Tuitt hasn't had a full healthy season in a while. Tyson Alulu's 100 years old. Vince Williams is coming back for one last ride too. Joe Hayden's 32 years old. There's so much age on this team. David DeCastro wasn't healthy all season last year. Juju Smith-Schuster has dealt with his handful of injuries. It could get bad. It could get real bad real quick. And I think 18 games is, if you are ever going to pick a season to not have any depth anywhere, the first 18-week season is not the way to go about this. I don't know what they could do either. I don't think that you could even fix that at this point in the offseason. I don't think you could go out and find guys to come in and say, okay, worst case scenario, TJ Watt goes down and we have somebody that isn't Quincy Roche to fill in there. Worst case scenario, Tyson Alulu goes down and, Henry Mondu doesn't have to be the guy playing 45 snaps a game. I don't think there's any way to fix any of that at this point in the spring.
Yeah, it's tough, but, let's just go back to the original question. Are the Steelers Super Bowl contenders? That's tough, man. On paper they are, but, football isn't played on paper.
Yep.
Right?
Are they on paper, though? If you compare them to other teams, I mean, Cleveland's got a lot of depth. Baltimore's got some depth.
They're certainly contenders, man. Let's talk about Cleveland. Cleveland definitely got better over the course of the offseason. I think it's kind of fair to say they should be the favorites to win the division heading to next year. Baltimore, though, I don't think Baltimore got better. I think they lost, a lot of pieces on the defensive side of the ball, and somehow they upgraded with getting Alejandro Villanueva over Orlando Brown, which is still a mystery. But, that's a whole other podcast we can dive into.
That would be a whole podcast. I got to stop with the Al Villanueva slander because people are getting mad. Ravens fans love their Big Al. Yeah, they love him 3 months ago. Love their Big Al, though. Good for them.
Yeah, no, super good for them. And just kind of looking at everything else, I mean, when you tell people that the Steelers would finish third in the AFC North, they start to get all riled up. But, when you take a closer look at it, you take a look at how Cleveland got better over the offseason. You take a look at how Baltimore still kind of remained intact offensively. Defensively is going to be a whole other question. But, I mean, is it crazy to say the Steelers, their range of what they might do can go from Super Bowl contender to finishing third in the AFC North?
No, that range is actually exactly where they are right now.
Yeah.
If they start off as hot as they possibly could start off or finish as strong as they could finish, the Steelers are up there with Kansas City. If they come out here and Big Ben isn't what Big Ben was. The defense is nowhere near as good as we expect them to be. And the Najee Harris is not NFL ready, nor is the offensive line. The Steelers could easily look at a losing season. That's a real possibility for this team with the hardest schedule in the NFL. So I don't know. On paper is that's a big word too. I don't know I guess if you just wrote down every starter for the Pittsburgh Steelers, they would probably be Super Bowl contenders on paper. If you wrote down everyone behind them, you'd be really nervous about the Pittsburgh Steelers. And that's where we are right now. And again, I don't think it gets changed. In other news surrounding the Steelers, Troy Polamalu, one of 5 Steelers that will be enshrined into Canton, Ohio this summer, has selected his Hall of Fame presenter, former Steelers defensive coordinator and Hall of Famer Dick LeBeau. I think this is perfect. I think everybody else believes it's perfect. And I think it says something about, Troy has his issues with the Steelers, but he doesn't have his issues with the people who were within the Steelers at the time. And I think that says a lot about him and the situation that he's been in with them.
Yeah, for a guy who was almost looked at as a literal saint in the city of Pittsburgh, like Troy, kind of how he carried himself and what he did for the Steelers, seeing him not on the best terms with the organization, it sucks. It's not a good feeling at all, especially for a guy like Troy's magnitude. But I think you hit the nail on the head. I think his problems aren't with the people he was around. It was more so just kind of the organization in general, how that all ended with Polamalu's departure. But I think Dick LeBeau is the perfect guy to see him into the Hall of Fame. I mean, LeBeau, for every bit of Polamalu's career was there for him. He was a leader, a coach, a mentor for him. And I think if anybody can kind of give us, the public an insight on how Troy was as a person and as a player, what he was like, what he did, not only on the field, but off the field, it's going to be Dick LeBeau. I mean, Dick LeBeau is a legend in his own right. He's got his own gold jacket, but I think it'll be really special, considering the relationship that those two had over the course of his career in Pittsburgh. And yeah, what better guy to kind of capture Polamalu and, what he was as a Steeler than the guy who, coached him for so long.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of cool. You look at the Canton, Ohio lineup for the Steelers, and you have Donnie Shell and Alan Faneca, Bill Cowher, Troy, and Bill Nunn was already enshrined, but obviously he'll be represented. Big 5 right there. And then you go Art Rooney, Hines Ward, and Dick LeBeau as presenters. That's a Hall of Fame lineup right there. That's insane. You're going to get some stories. Yeah. Those are guys that, like you said, Dick LeBeau is the only person that I would trust to give give me the best insight to who Troy Polamalu was as a person and a player. Hines Ward, I love Hines Ward and everything Hines Ward is. And I think that's perfect for Alan Faneca because I want to know who Alan Faneca was as a leader. Hines Ward was as big of a leader, if not bigger, as Alan Faneca at times. And then Art Rooney, you can't go wrong with Art Rooney at all. His speech will probably be very generic and heartfelt, but it's still Art Rooney. You gotta love it. It's an all-star lineup for the Steelers.
Dude, goosebumps, man. Goosebumps talking about it, dude. Just the people in that, that Hall of Fame class, like you said. And, I'm not a big whiskey and cigar guy, but if you can give me the opportunity to sit in the room with whiskey and cigars and kind of talk with those guys, easy.
I don't even need to say words. I would just sit down. Donnie's got noises again. We're going to call this one the dog. At least no one's cutting the grass.
It is.
At least no one's cutting the grass. That was a great time.
I think they're pulling up right now to BH.
To cut the grass. Well, that is the perfect way to end this week's episode then. Thank you, everybody, for jumping on with us for another episode of All Steelers Talk. Find all of our stuff at allsteelers.com. Make sure to subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify, and we will see you next week.